The night Ose Mensa walked into Hawa's stall with holes in his shoes and pride in his eyes, she almost turned him away. She almost did, and she would have spent the rest of her life not knowing what she had nearly thrown aside. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. Hawa Darko was 31 years old and had been waking up before the sun for 11 years. Not because she wanted to, because if she didn't, the EGUC wouldn't be ready by 6, and if the EGUC wasn't ready by 6, the construction workers heading to the site on Broadview wouldn't stop, and if they didn't stop, she wouldn't make enough to pay Marcus at the end of the month. Marcus being the man who owned the corner spot she rented in the Parkdale market, a man who smiled with his mouth but counted every dollar with his eyes. She had a small operation, a folding table, a deep pot, a single-burner gas stove, a hand-painted sign that her daughter Abra had made when she was 7. The sign said Hawa's Kitchen in purple and green letters, slightly crooked, and Hawa had never replaced it, even when the rain made the ink bleed, because Abra had pressed her tongue between her teeth the entire time she was painting it, concentrating the way only a child can concentrate on something that matters to them. Abra was 14 now and embarrassed by the sign. Hawa kept it anyway. She had come to Toronto from Accra 22 years ago, following her aunt, who had followed a man who had, ultimately, followed someone else entirely and left them both behind. But her aunt was a practical woman, and they had figured things out, the way women from home always figure things out, quietly, without making it anyone else's problem. Her aunt was gone now, 7 years already, and Hawa had the market stall and the apartment on Lansdowne that let in cold air through the window frames from October through April, and Abra, and the pot that had once belonged to her grandmother and still smelled faintly of palm oil even when it was clean. She had enough. That was what she told herself on the hard days. I have enough. She did not always believe it. OC came on a Tuesday in late October, when the sky had turned the color of old pewter, and everyone was wearing scarves they had been quietly dreading since August. He was not a man you would look at twice. Medium height, medium build, wearing a jacket that had seen better winters, the kind of olive green that had faded to the color of nothing in particular. His shoes were leather once. You could still tell, if you looked closely. He sat down on the plastic stool across from her stall, the way someone sits when their feet have made the decision before their mind did. He didn't order anything. He just sat. Hawa watched him from the corner of her eye while she served the man from the electrical company his groundnut soup and plantain. She knew regulars, and she knew strangers, and she knew a third category, people who were neither, people who had simply run out of places to be and landed somewhere by accident. This man had that quality. The quality of someone who had arrived somewhere unexpectedly and was still working out what to do about it. She finished serving. She wiped down the counter. She looked at him directly. "You eating or just sitting?" she said, not unkindly, just plainly. He looked up. He had the eyes of someone who had not slept well. Not last night, not for some time, and something else underneath that. Something careful. "I don't have money," he said. Hawa had heard that before. She heard it more than people assumed. The market on Roncesvalles was not a wealthy neighborhood. Not anymore. Not like the magazines were starting to make it look. There were still people here who meant what they said when they said they had nothing. She looked at him another moment. Then she reached for the ladle. "Sit straight then," she said. "You're making me tired just looking at you." She gave him a bowl of the stew. Not a small bowl. The real bowl, the one she charged $8 for. She added a piece of fish from the second pot, the one she had been saving for the lunchtime crowd. She set it down in front of him with a small bottle of water, and she went back to her work. He didn't say thank you immediately. He just looked at the food for a moment, the way you look at something when it costs you something to receive it. Then he ate. He ate slowly. Not because the food wasn't good. It was, and they both knew it. But like someone trying to make something last. Like someone who understood the specific sadness of good things ending. When he was finished, he said, "This is the best thing I've eaten in 3 weeks." 3 weeks is too long, Hawa said, without looking up. Yes, he agreed, it is. He sat for a little while longer. The morning rush came and went. Hawa worked, and he watched, and there was nothing uncomfortable about it. Some people know how to be present without demanding anything. He was one of those people. Before he left, he said, "What's your name?" "Hawa, Hawa," he repeated, like he was writing it somewhere. "I'm Osei." "Osei," she said, the same way. He left. His shoes clicked on the wet pavement. She watched him go and then turned back to the pot and thought nothing more of it, or tried not to. He came back on Thursday. He had the same jacket. He sat on the same stool. This time he said, before she could ask, "I still don't have money, but I can help. If you need anything moved, carried, set up." Hawa looked at him. "Can you chop onions without crying?" she said. He almost smiled. "I can try." He chopped onions. He cried. He did not mention it, and neither did she, and that was the beginning of something, though neither of them would have been able to say what exactly. He came back every Tuesday and Thursday after that. He carried the heavy propane tank from her car. He set up the folding table legs when they stuck, because the left leg had a warp in the metal that required a specific angle of force that Hawa had learned over years and had taught him in one morning. He stayed out of the way when she was busy and talked when it was quiet, which was how she preferred things. She learned pieces of him slowly, the way you learn a place you walk through every day. Not all at once, but detail by detail, until one morning you realize you know it. He was from Kumasi, originally. He had a sister still there, and a mother who called every Sunday and pretended not to worry. And he pretended not to notice. She was pretending. He had studied engineering. He did not say where. He did not say why he was here in Parkdale on a Tuesday morning with holes in his shoes instead of somewhere else doing something else. She did not ask. This was something she had learned from her aunt. There are things people will tell you when they are ready, and questions only push the telling further away. On a Friday in November, Abra came to help after school. She was the kind of teenager who walked like she was always slightly annoyed by the angle of the ground, but she worked hard when she worked, and Hawa had never had to ask her twice. She had her father's jaw and her grandmother's eyes and her own particular stubbornness that belonged to no one else in the family tree. She saw Osei setting up the table and said to her mother, in Twi, "Who is that?" "Someone who helps," Hawa said. "Why does he help?" "Because I feed him and he has hands." Abra considered this. "Is he your boyfriend?" "Go and stir the pot." "That's not a no, Abra." She went and stirred the pot, but she watched Osei with the suspicious attention of a 14-year-old who has appointed herself the guardian of her mother's dignity. And Osei, who must have felt it, looked over and said very seriously, "You have your mother's eyes." Abra said, "People say that." "They're right," he said. And that, Hawa could tell, was the exact right thing to say, because her daughter's face did something brief and involuntary that meant she had decided not to dislike him. Abra had her grandmother's eyes and her grandmother's stubbornness, and her grandmother had always been the first to warm to people and the last to admit it. What Hawa did not know, what no one in the Parkdale market knew, what Marcus counting his dollars did not know, what the man from the electrical company eating his soup every morning did not know, was this. Osi Mensah was not a man who needed her stew. He was a man who had chosen it. He was 43 years old. He had built his first company at 27 in Accra, sold it at 31, built the second one in London, sold that at 38, and come to Toronto 2 years ago to build the third, which was now the kind of company that got written about in the Globe and Mail in that particular breathless way that Canadian business journalism writes about things it is genuinely surprised by. He had more money than he would ever need. He had an apartment in Yorkville with a view of the lake. He had a car he rarely drove, and a phone that never stopped, and a calendar that looked, if you printed it out, like a wall of obligations with no visible sky. He had everything, and he had started going to the Parkdale market on a Tuesday morning in October because his therapist, whom he saw on Zoom on Monday evenings, had said to him the week before, "Osi, when last did you sit somewhere that did not require you to perform? When last did someone treat you like a person and not a position?" He had not been able to answer. He had driven around on Tuesday morning, not entirely sure what he was looking for, and parked on Roncesvalles and walked until his feet stopped. They stopped at Hawa's stall. He had told her he had no money. It was the first lie he had told in a long time, and he had told it because he needed to know what happened next. He needed to see what a person did when you had nothing to offer them, when there was no reason to be kind except the kindness itself. She had given him the $8 bowl of stew and the fish she had been saving, without hesitation, without asking anything, without making him feel the weight of receiving. He had eaten that stew on a plastic stool in a Parkdale market on a Tuesday morning and felt, for the first time in longer than he could properly remember, like a human being at rest. He told himself he would go back once more, to thank her properly. He would leave money, leave without explaining. He went back on Thursday, and then he found himself chopping onions and making the left table leg behave, and Thursday became Tuesday, and Tuesday became Thursday. And the weeks passed the way weeks do when you are, without fully meaning to, building something. He had not planned to lie. He had not planned to continue. He kept telling himself he would explain. Next week, next time, after the groundnut soup, before the morning rush. There was always a reason the moment was wrong. The truth is that he was afraid. Not of her, of what she would think. He had watched her work. He knew what she was, the way she moved through her days, the efficiency of her kindness, the way she spoke to her daughter, the patience she had with difficult customers that came not from servility, but from a very clear personal decision about how she wanted to move through the world. He had watched her give the last portion of her soup to an old man who came every Friday and always said he'd pay next week. And he had watched her write it off in her little notebook without her expression changing at all. She was someone who had decided a long time ago what kind of person she was going to be. He was not sure he could say the same about himself, and he was afraid that when she found out who he was, the Yorkville apartment, the Globe and Mail profile, the car he rarely drove, she would understand the months of Tuesday and Thursday as something they were not, as research, as charity, as the rich man collecting an experience like a souvenir. He did not know how to explain that it was the opposite, that he had been the one receiving something, all along. It was Abra who found out first. She was 16 by then. 2 years had passed, and don't let anyone tell you that time moves slowly in a market stall, because it doesn't. It moves the way it always moves, indifferently and without warning. And she was doing a school project on Canadian tech companies. She was in the kitchen with her laptop, and the groundnut soup her mother had left covered on the stove, and she was scrolling through search results, and she stopped. She looked at the screen for a long time. Then she picked up her phone. She did not call her mother. She called Osei. He answered on the second ring. "Abra, I'm looking at your picture," she said, in the Globe, from last year. A long silence. "Yes," he said. "You have a lot of money." "Yes." Another silence. She could hear him breathing carefully, the way adults breathe when they are deciding something. Does my mother know? She said. No, why not? I was afraid, he said. And because it was Abra, who had her grandmother's eyes and her grandmother's stubbornness and an absolute contempt for dishonesty that she wore like a coat, he told her the truth. All of it, from the beginning. The therapist, the Tuesday morning, the shoes, the soup, what he had needed to know, and what he had found out, and what he had been unable to stop coming back for, and why he was afraid. Abra listened without interrupting. When he was done, she said, "She's going to be angry. I know. She really doesn't like being deceived. I know. She's going to say it was charity, and you made it complicated, and she doesn't need your pity. I know. Are you going to come and explain it anyway?" A pause. "Yes," he said. "Tomorrow." "Good," said Abra. And then, just before she hung up, "Oh, yes." She kept the first bowl, the one you ate from. She washed it and put it at the back of the shelf. She doesn't know that I noticed. She hung up. O.C. sat in his apartment in Yorkville with the lake outside his window and his phone in his hand, and he felt something move through him that he did not have an adequate word for. It was not happiness exactly. It was something older than that. Something that required you to have lost things before you could recognize it. He came to the stall the next morning, earlier than usual. Before the construction workers, before Marcus, before the morning even properly began. Hawa was setting up alone. She looked up when she heard his step, and then she looked again because something was different about him, and she was a woman who noticed things. He was wearing a different jacket, a good one. The shoes were different too, and he was standing in a way he had never stood at her stall. Not the careful, slightly folded posture of a man trying to take up less space, but straight, like someone who had made a decision and was standing inside it. "Osei," she said. "Hawa," he said. "I need to tell you something. Will you let me speak before you say anything?" She put down the ladle. She crossed her arms, not in anger, but in the particular way of a woman who is preparing to hear something she may not like. He told her, all of it. He told her about the therapist and the Tuesday and the shoes he had worn on purpose. He told her what he had needed to find out and what she had shown him without knowing. He told her about the months of Tuesdays and Thursdays and what they had meant to him. And he told her he was sorry for the lie, not the visiting, not the eating, not the helping with the table, only the lie, which had started as a test and become a shame he carried. He told her the truth, the way you tell it, when you have practiced it many times in your head, and it still comes out sideways, incomplete, not as clean as you wanted, but true. When he finished, it was quiet for a moment. The city moved around them. A streetcar went by. Someone across the way was opening a metal shutter, and it made its clanging sound. Hawa looked at him. "You wore bad shoes," she said. "Yes, on purpose." "Yes. See if I would give you the soup, yes." She was quiet again. He had been right. She was angry. He could see it. Not the loud kind, but the quiet kind that women who have worked very hard for a very long time carry in a specific place in the chest, the kind that comes not from being surprised, but from being unsurprised, from recognizing a familiar shape. "I don't need your pity," she said. "I know. I never pitied you. I envied you." That stopped her. "You envied me," she said flatly. "Yes, I make $60 on a good day, Osei. I know. My daughter's school shoes have tape on the right one because I'm waiting until next paycheck go. I know, and you envied me. You know who you are," he said. "I had forgotten who I was. You gave me soup. You didn't ask anything, you just..." He stopped. He started again. "I have been sitting across from important people for 15 years, and I have not felt as seen as I felt on that stool on that Tuesday. That is an embarrassing thing to admit. I am admitting it anyway." Hawa looked at him for a long time. The morning was very still. "The bowl," she said finally. "What?" "Abra told you about the bowl." "She did." Hawa looked away. She looked at the sign, Hawa's kitchen in purple and green, slightly crooked, rain softened at the edges. She was quiet for long enough that Osi understood she was not going to speak again until she was ready, and he waited, because he had learned, in 2 years of Tuesdays and Thursdays, how to be present without demanding anything. Then she turned back. "You could have told me," she said. "After the first week, yes, you should have told me. Yes, don't do it again." He blinked. "I won't, any of it. Don't test people. If you want to know someone, ask them. You don't have to trick them into showing you who they are. You're right." "I know I'm right," she said. And then something changed in her face, very slightly. The way a room changes when someone opens a window, not dramatically, just the quality of the air. "Sit down, Ose." He sat. She made him tea. She did not make it as a gesture. She made it because the morning was cold, and the kettle was already on, and it was what you did for someone who was sitting at your table in the cold. He wrapped both hands around the mug. "What happens now?" he said. "Now," she said, "you are going to help me with the left table leg before the morning rush, because it is still warped, and that has not changed just because you have a view of the lake. And then I am going to think about the rest." "Okay," he said. "And Osi, yes? Abra's shoes. The ones with the tape? What about them? I will handle that." "Hawa, I will handle it," she said again, with the particular firmness of a woman who means it, who has always meant it, who will continue to mean it regardless of what else changes. "You can be in our lives or you can throw money at it. Choose." He looked at her. "I want to be in your lives," he said. "Then fix the table leg," she said. "And be honest from now on. That's all I'm asking." He stood up. He found the angle. The left leg clicked into place the way it always did when you knew the trick of it. The morning rush came. He helped. Months later, Abra would tell her friends, when she could be persuaded to tell anyone, which was not often, that she knew the moment she saw him stand up from that plastic stool on the first day, the way her mother watched him walk away and then turn back to the pot. She would say, "My mother is not a person who watches people walk away. She's a person who moves on." And she had watched. She would not say, because she was 16 and had her grandmother's stubbornness, that she had been glad, but she was. The sign above the stall still says Hawa's Kitchen, in purple and green, slightly crooked. The edges softened where the rain got in. Abra is 19 now and studying to be a nurse at Ryerson, and she has stopped being embarrassed by it. She says it has character. Hawa says it has a lot of things. Ose still comes on Tuesdays and Thursdays. He helps with the table. He still can't chop onions without crying. He has stopped pretending that he can. And Hawa, who has a particular gift for not making people feel the weight of receiving, has never once mentioned it. Some people know how to give without asking anything in return. Some people have decided, a long time ago, what kind of person they are going to be. The world needs more of them. And if you are watching this right now, from wherever you are, Toronto, Kingston, Vancouver, wherever the cold finds you, ask yourself, when last did someone do something kind for you when they had nothing to gain? And when last did you do that for someone else? If you found something in this story, leave a comment and let us know where you're watching from. We read every single one. And if you're new here, welcome to Ancient African Folktales. Subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Because what comes next is always worth staying for.